everyone, this is Richard with Richard's Beer Review. Today I'm talking about the first brewers. Thank you for joining me in a little bit of beer history. This is part 2 of the beginning of beer. I am drinking St. Arnold's. This is called French Press and it's an Imperial Coffee Porter. It's a delicious strong stout with 9.4% ABV, which stands for alcohol by volume. Since the beginning of brewing over 6,000 years ago, brewing was predominantly done by women. Brewing was a very time-consuming process that mostly required local grains and fruit and took a long time. It was basically like cooking. Brewing beer stayed a woman affair until about the 6th century, where monks started brewing beer in volume. In England and most of Europe, beer was brewed in households. Women that brew good beer became popular and were highly regarded by their towns. These homes of good beer became gathering places for the community. These alewives, as they were known, also were considered to possess mystical powers because not till the year 1800 did we get an understanding of the fertilization process that created alcohol. So before then, the enchanting effects of alcohol was considered magical. So why am I talking about women brewers? Well, for 3 very good reasons. Number 1, they were exclusively the creators of beer and guardians of the secret of brewing for over 6,000 years. So cheers to women for that. Second reason is because of why am I talking of women beer brewers, is because the last episode was about the beginning of beer. So this episode is about the beginner brewers, and they were women. The third reason is because it's October and Halloween is coming. And I'm going to explain to you women breweries as they were known, or women brewers as they were known, have some very interesting correlation with witches. So stay tuned and I'll give you my explanation. Okay, so let's talk about some of the fun stuff in Halloween and witches and women and beer brewing. Okay, first of all, the intoxicating effects of alcohol were considered magical. So women brewers who created this magical elixir were considered to have magical powers or mystical powers. So number 1. Number 2, all beer was warm brew at that time, and it was a long process that it required constant mixing and lots of fruits, berries, and who knows what else was going into that pot to brew this beer. Third, was created exclusively by women, and these women were protected by the community. So they lived to be old women, much older than most of the people in the community, because they were protected because they were the only ones that could produce this magical potion. And they kept the secret and they only passed it on to their probably even daughters or assistants. Another reason is in the 1600s, when businesses started making beer in England, it was illegal for women to own business. So even the women were the possessors of the formula and the knowledge of brewing beer, and the breweries had to hide the women in the basement where they saw no light, and therefore they were mostly pale, but British people are mostly pale. So I don't know how that flies. But anyway, you got now a woman stirring a pot, hot pot, throwing ingredients, creating a magical elixir potion. Another reason, all the way from the Crusades, small towns share the responsibility of providing comfort and drinks to strangers that came through town. So different houses will share the responsibility of being the watering hole for strangers, passerbys through their small town. So how do you know which house is the designated watering hole or beer place? At that time, there was still some beer being brewed in those communities, is they used to hang a broomstick over the door, because everybody had a broomstick. So you put a broomstick over the door, and that's the designation where it's safe for you to go in there and get a drink. And guess who happens to be making the drink? Some old lady in the basement stirring a pot, creating magic. So all these effects created this mysticism that it is believed that men, scared of losing power, they started creating these rumors that these women possess witchery and evil, and they gave them a bad name, and therefore the whole idea of witches were created. That's, of course, one angle. There's many angles about witches, but that's the one that I would like to believe. The hat didn't come till much later in Hollywood, and that's one of the reasons why I'm bringing beer in October, because of the witches and what the correlation between witches and beer. If you don't buy it, well, that's my good explanation. So I hope you like my little history on the first brewers of beer. If you have some information that might help me contribute my other stories, if it's positive, bring it in, comment. If it's negative, keep it to yourself. This is my show. Now I'm going to talk about, I'm going to end every show with the word of the day. That's a word that's related to brewing beers. So the word of the day is actually an acronym, not a word. It's ABW. So ABW means alcohol by weight. It was the standard use in the US for many, many years. But now most brewers have adopted ABV. That is what we see, which stands for alcohol by volume. And I didn't really read into the reasons why, but to me, I believe it was probably because ABV is by volume, so therefore it's easier to compare to other alcoholic drinks like rum, vodka, wine. All those are categorized in ABV, so it only makes sense for beer also to be an alcohol by volume. So there's your word of the day. Again, thank you for listening to Richard's Beer Review, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye.